Hey everyone, Jim Williams here. I'm a seven-time Emmy Award-winning producer director of mainly sports and entertainment. And COVID-19 has affected pretty much everything that we do, from shopping to going out to entertainment to just even, having a nice evening out with friends. But when it comes to sports, it may very well have changed the landscape forever. Let me explain. As most of you know, as baseball season has wrapped up, and we're in the postseason part of that, no team traveled broadcasters. So what that meant was, very simply, that when the Yankees, for instance, or the Mets, were at home, then they had their broadcast teams at the park. When they were on the road, they would then go back to the park, Yankee Stadium or Citi Field, and do their games from there. The games were actually produced in what we call an international feed. Well, that simply means that they have one truck instead of the normal two, where, for instance, if the Yankees were playing, let's say, against the Los Angeles Dodgers or the Angels broadcast crew would have their truck, as would the Yes folks. So you have two trucks, two separate crews, two producers, two directors, two graphics, all two of everything, okay? That was not the case this year. One truck per venue, which meant also that it had to be available for a broadcast of a national game like a Fox or an ESPN or um, Major League Baseball Network or TBS. All of those had to be done that way. So one camera, one truck, one set of cameramen, one set of audio people, directors, producers. All the graphics were put in back at the studio. So if you're watching a Yankee game, all the graphics were put on back at the studio. If you're watching a national game, it was done back at their. If it's ESPN, it was done at Bristol. If it was Fox, it was done in Los Angeles. If it was the folks at Turner, it was done in Atlanta. And that's how they did everything. And the broadcasters on the national games were also not in the stadiums. Okay. Now, as we move forward into the playoffs, you will have some broadcasters in the actual venues. The National League teams will be in Dallas and in Houston. The American League teams will be in Los Angeles and San Diego, with the World Series for the first time since 1944 taking place at a neutral site, which will be in Arlington, Texas. So that's how that's changed that. Now, the NBA finals are going on. There are announcers there. They have been embedded there in the area in Walt Disney World in Orlando. All the teams have been at Disney World for over 2 months now. And so as the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers face off for the NBA championship, the production crews themselves, if it's an ESPN ABC broadcast, they're in Bristol producing and directing games, putting graphics in. If it's a Turner game, then they're in Atlanta doing the same thing. Studio shows all being done from the studios in either Bristol or of course, in Atlanta. So that's how that works. We just saw the Stanley Cup finals recently. And that was all done in Canada, with half the games, the Eastern teams playing in Toronto, the Western teams playing in Edmonton, and the Cup championship won by the Tampa Bay Lightning was done in Edmonton, Alberta. Interesting point, Kenny Albert, who many of you know from his work on MSG and Fox and NBC. I mean, Kenny's the hardest working guy at broadcasting, one of my favorite people. Love Kenny. Kenny, when he left the bubble, as it's called, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, where he was calling games for NBC and was about to take his job at Fox for calling NFL, Kenny had to quarantine for 14 days. So he missed a couple of football games, but he's back now and he's back doing the games. So even quarantine of broadcasters happen. So we are now in the NFL. Now the NFL is a little different. The NFL and college football are a little different. The NFL, they have the opportunity to have their broadcasters there. It's a once a week event, so from that standpoint, bringing them in and bringing them out is not an issue. They do not traditionally, broadcasters and beat writers have access to the players, the coaches, and such. They do not have that. So what happens during the course of the week, much like we've all come to learn about Zoom and other uh, FaceTime, other different ways to communicate with people without physically being in the room, the broadcasters would have Zoom conference calls with the head coaches and some of the top players. And they would pick their brains so that they know about it when they get to the stadium, but they would not have any access to the players or the coaches once they get to the building. Okay? So they're socially distanced. They're 5 to 6 feet apart in their booth. The trucks that are doing the game, again, socially distanced inside the trucks. They're actually plastic, plexiglass, if you will, partitions between stations inside the truck. So the director's sitting where I would be sitting, like right here. To my left would be associate director, and to my right would be the technical director. In most cases, this case, they're socially distanced as best they can, which means there are plexiglass partitions in the truck. Then behind us would be the producer, graphics, and all of that. That's even cut back. They put the graphics in a separate little truck outside the main truck. So they've done everything they can to help socially distance even the crews. Okay, so it's been an amazing situation to be sure as to how they've done this, both college coverage of college football and the NFL. So everybody's doing the best they can to keep people from getting ill. Many of the broadcasters, now we're talking again about the NFL, many of the broadcasters on the radio side do not travel. So if you're listening to the Giants broadcast or the Jets broadcast or whomever, wherever you may be in the country, the home games, they will be there. The away games, they likely won't. So if the Giants are playing in Philadelphia or the Jets are playing in San Diego, they will be watching the games on TV and calling the games off the monitors. Now, that's exactly what was done by the local broadcasters for baseball this year and the national broadcasters. Okay, so calling it off of a monitor, just no different than you or I watching it on television, is pretty much what they've done. They do give them additional feeds, so you're seeing what the truck has. So you get to see some different things that you and I wouldn't see, but at the same time, they're just calling the game off of, for all intents and purposes, a flat screen television set. Okay, and 9 times out of 10, I don't think anybody even knows or cares for that matter. In some cases, during the baseball season, Joe Buck would be in Denver, and John Smoltz would be at the MLB Network studios in Secaucus, New Jersey. So they not only were they not in the city where they were doing the game, they weren't even sitting next. They were 2,000 miles apart from each other. But that just goes to show, folks, the importance that the broadcast industry made with regard to social distancing. Now, in golf, in tennis, we've all, just about every sport we've seen, there's been an effort made by the networks, by the local and regional networks, to be as cautious as possible. Just like anything else in this world, there's been a lot of, when you only have one feed coming out of a venue where you normally would have two, sometimes even three feeds coming out of the same venue, there's less work. So we've had a lot of people in the broadcast industry who because of COVID, have had issues and not been working. So a lot of camera people, a lot of tech people not working, broadcasters not working, as well as producers, directors, all the way down the line. So COVID-19 has hit the broadcast industry quite hard. Same thing with the radio aspect of it as well. Now, how is this changing things for the future, right? Well, we've learned a couple things, and that is that we can call games, specifically baseball. We'll use that as a good example, as well as the NBA, especially when when they hadn't quite gotten to the playoffs, but they're still playing down in Orlando. We can call those games from monitors and perhaps save time, effort, and money by producing games where the announcers are not on site, where you share production costs. This is kind of an old school thing. Back when I began, we had what we called shared feeds. And if I were when there would be times when I would be the home director, and I would simply have a camera or two that would be for the visitor's feed, and the producer of the visitor's feed would be behind me, and they would be putting the graphics back at their facility. We would be putting the graphics back in at our facility, and for all intents and purposes, it was my show, but I gave, as I said, with a couple extra cameras, they had the ability to shoot their talent on camera, and maybe one camera that they wanted off of, say, first or second base, or first or third base. That's the way we used to do it, because again, in the old days, the stadiums were not big enough to handle having that many cameras around. Same thing with the indoor arenas. There just wasn't that many places you could put cameras and broadcasters. So anyway, everything old is kind of new again. They're bringing some of that back. The thing that I think most of you are finding out is that the beat reporters for the newspapers and for the television stations, and for those who cover the sport, are finding out that obviously they don't have the access to the players. I mean, normally during football season, you would go out, you would have time to walk around the facility, watch the practices, and when the practices were over, you would sit down and perhaps have a chat with one or two of the players, maybe a couple of the coaches. That isn't happening anymore. Okay, what happens now is every day the teams make available a certain number of players. There's a Zoom conference. The coach will call on reporters, much like it would be as a press conference, and everybody gets the same access to the coaches and the players, no matter what your media feed is, or no matter what who's covering the games. It's kind of funny. Back in the day, Dick Schaap, who was a dear friend of mine, who many of you know from his days in New York as a writer for a number of newspapers, and of course the editor of Sport Magazine, and his fine work he did both with ABC and NBC, and his son Jeremy, who's an outstanding journalist and on his own account. Dick used to say that he didn't like to talk to players after the game. And I said, why was that? He said, well, Jim, players, games, when I write a column, because again, he was not a beat writer, he was a columnist. He goes, I look at it like a theater critic, okay? When a theater critic watches a play, he doesn't go down and ask the actors after the play's over about their motivation or whether they're feeling good or anything. He reacts, or she, as a critic, reacts to what they see. And they take into account that, the performance is good. All right, we give them a good review. Dick used to say, that's the way I look at sports. It's if they played a game, because I've seen thousands of games, I don't really need a coach to tell me whether he didn't do the right thing or did do the right thing. I don't need a player to tell me, what his mindset was when he stood there and watched a third strike, or he missed a pass, or took a shot that was ill-advised in a basketball game. So, we have in these days, as I said, with COVID-19, we now have teams having much more control over the athletes and when they speak to the media, how they speak to the media. And I think that might very well be something that we see going forward. The teams have been, I should say, have been very good about doing the best to get their players out so that people who cover the teams and cover the games can indeed have access to them via Zoom and other social media type situations so that they can get their quotes and put together a package. But the one-on-one scrums, I mean, I know that you all have seen what it's like when you watch on news or watch after a game, and you see 7 or 8 reporters, standing around a locker talking to one of the stars of the games, or standing around talking to coaches or players. I don't think that's going to be gone. I think that will be gone. And as somebody who used to spend a lot more time in locker rooms than I really wanted to, I can honestly tell you, being in a locker room right after a game is probably the least enjoyable part of being involved in sports. Players, if they win, they're happy. If they lose, they're not so happy. They tend to, this is, again, remember, this is right after something happened. So the game's over. They haven't had time to process it. They know they won or they lost. And so it's really not a good time to get, you get these reactions. Sometimes you get a reaction that, and a lot of times you get a reaction where a coach or a player says something that, on Monday or Tuesday when you go back and see them, they say, well, you know what? When we talked about that the other day, I said this, but, I got to look at the film or I got to go and check out some video or talk to the coaches about it. And, here's what really happened. And so that post-game stuff where you get the person when it's just after the game is not always as good as you would hope it to be, and not always as accurate as you would, again, hope it or think it to be. So I think that what we're going to see more of is these Zoom interviews where when you read about something or see something on television, there'll be less of a visceral reaction as to how a game was won or lost, and more thought put into it when they speak to someone 24 hours after the game, 48 hours after a game. So that's, I think, going to be changing the way things are done. So we'll get that via Zoom as well. So, with the Big Ten and Pac-12 and others starting very, very late, and COVID's really not gone. So when people say, well, next year it's going to be different. Well, we don't know that. We don't know how it's going to be done. And I know a lot of the leagues are in the midst of negotiating their contracts. Major League Baseball, the NFL, they are in the midst of negotiating some of their contracts. The Sunday deal with Fox is up, and so estimations are that Fox will pay close to $2 billion. Right now they're paying a little over $1.3, $1.4 billion for the Sunday rights, the National Football Conference, the NFC. It's quite frankly possible that they will pay in excess of $2 billion for their contract extension. NBC undoubtedly will pay probably 50% more for their Sunday night telecast. CBS will undoubtedly pay another 50% more to keep the American Football Conference. ESPN, which right now is somewhat hemorrhaging money because they have so many college contracts and NFL contracts and Major League Baseball contracts that that they're going to likely they'll keep the Monday night package, but they how far over and above what they get will come. We'll see. My guess is that the situations with Amazon and YouTube and the streaming services will be very healthy for all sports, and that's something we did see through COVID. Was a tremendous amount of streaming of sporting events, and I think that that's something that is more, without a doubt, going to be more prevalent. It started 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's become commonplace for people to watch their sporting events on their tablets, on their phones. It's in your pocket these days, folks, so you can take your sports with you anywhere you want to go. So if you want to watch the French Open today, or you want to watch the football game, or whatever it is, you can watch it on your phone, you can watch it on a tablet, you can watch it at home on your television. So the connected devices, the ability to have it in your pocket and carry it with you, that's without question something that it's already started. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that, so they're going to be major players as well. So what we have here in COVID-19, 2021, 2019 through 2020 is, I'm not going to say the new normal, because that's silly. It's just, we're just going to call it normal now. It's not the new normal. It's, by now we've gotten used to it, so it is normal. The normal will be, especially since these are condensed seasons, the NBA, the NHL just got finished in just a week or so before October. The NBA won't get finished until sometime around mid-October. Obviously, the NFL and college football will hopefully be able to finish on time. We don't know at this point in time how many fans will be allowed to go to a Super Bowl in Tampa. Tampa's hosting the Super Bowl this year. We know that Florida's been one of the big hot spots. We hope that things are better in the Bay Area. So we don't know, again, how many people are going to be able to attend the games. Obviously, they'll be able to broadcast it, but attending the game is yet another thing. So attendance in games, how they covered them, we now have a template for it. We now know how it can be done. We now know how we can socially distance and cover things and do it more than adequately. One little pet peeve of mine, which I'll share with you. Fox has used what they call virtual fans. So when you're watching a game, it's kind of weird. There's no fans there. And we know that they've been cut out so that they've used, in the seats and all that. But Fox used the virtual fan. And that was actually, it was clever, but after a while it got a little bit gimmicky. So you watch a game and you see these fans, kind of like going up and down and moving. Basically what that was is like a video game. Okay, so think of it, if you're watching a video game, you're seeing these avatar type people that look like people, but they're not really people. Well, that's exactly what Fox did to kind of give it, you had the crowd noise, because crowd noise was piped into it, and that was done, the crowd noise was kind of done because the players, it's very odd to play and nobody in the stands is one thing, but there's no noise. And playing in a vacuum like that, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, soccer, whatever it is, it's very difficult to tell what's going on. You can't get psyched up. So, the piping into the music and the fans was beneficial to the players as much as it was to, if you listen to the radio, it's kind of funny. If you listen to the radio, you wouldn't know that there's nobody in the stands because of the only thing they didn't do is boo. So there's no booing, but just cheering. It was an interesting way to do things. But we now have, as I said, we have that template. How do we do it? Single truck, announcers, don't travel, stay away from the players. You have access to them via Zoom. The broadcasters can be at the stadium. They don't have to be at the stadium to call a good game. the ability to watch these games, hopefully with friends, hopefully if you'd like to go to a bar, watch it at a bar and have dinner and that routine, hopefully that'll come back. But as I said, not saying the new normal, the normal is that we now have a template to do these things and to do them properly and to do them right. And hopefully there'll be a day when you go back to the ballpark and sit there and yell and cheer for your favorite team, or yell and cheer at the umpires, or boo the opposing team, okay? But for now, we have to sit back and enjoy what we have. And what we have isn't so bad. It isn't so bad. It's an entertaining sport season where everything seemed to be compressed into one heck of a fall, and there's still more to come. So hope that you enjoy it. Know that everybody, both at the league offices, at the networks, at the regional networks, on the local level, at the radio side, they're doing everything they can to bring you the best possible coverage they can in a very, very difficult situation. And frankly, I got to say, I think they're doing pretty well. Thanks so much for your time. It's been a lot of fun visiting with you. I hope to do it again soon. Be well and enjoy following your favorite team, no matter who that may be in your favorite sport, no matter what that may be. I'm Jim Williams. Thanks for joining me today.